hipsters, flipsters, and finger-poppin' daddies, knock me your lobes.
Welcome to Phil and Ted's Sexy Boomer Show with your hosts, Phil Proctor and Ted Bonnet. Phil and Ted's guest today is Mr. Reggae, Roger Steffens. Roger is an actor, author, poet, photographer, Vietnam veteran, and reggae expert with the world's largest collection of Bob Marley material. And now, your sexy boomer hosts, Phil Proctor and Ted Bonnet.
Welcome to Phil and Ted's Sexy Boomer Show. I'm Ted Bonnet.
And I'm Phil Proctor.
And today we are in Reggae Land.
We're in a museum of reggae and ska, and the ska's the limit, at the beautiful home of Roger Steffens. And as Roger said, it's his third home because he collected so much memorabilia, he had to move out of his first two houses. But you have 7 rooms here dedicated to your collection.
7 rooms, floor to ceiling, and there's no room left.
And Raj is the primary go-to man for the history and story of reggae. He's written 10 books, and 7 of them have been about reggae. And how many about Bob Marley in particular?
Well, the 7, and 3 or 4 of them are specifically Bob.
And we'll get into all of that stuff, but the real thing about Roger and me is that we've been friends for, Roger reminded me, 45 years.
Yeah.
45 years.
Yeah.
I remember when we were friends for 33 and a third.
You know, if you're born in 33, you'd be 45 in 78.
That's right. But did we meet through... Oh, we met getting stoned in New York.
No, not in New York.
Where was it?
It was out here when I first came in 75, 76. I was doing industrial films for General Telephone, and your first wife, Barbara, was working there.
Right.
When somehow Firesign Theatre came up, and I almost jumped out of my skin. I said, "You're married to Phil Proctor."
Yeah.
Oh, my God. The Firesign Theatre kept me sane when I was in Vietnam.
How was it that you first got turned on to the Firesign Theatre?
I had a friend, a poet named Jerry Burns, who was living on the border of Berkeley and Oakland in 1967.
A guy named Burns is the perfect one to introduce you to the Firesign Theatre.
Yeah. He had the album, and I got a copy before I left, and I brought it to Vietnam with me. And, of course, everybody in Nam immediately went to the PX and bought T-Act reel-to-reel tape recorders and cassette recorders and a turntable if you had a barracks room big enough to hold it. And so I started making copies of The Electrician for guys who would come through group headquarters in Saigon on their way out to field. Oh. And I wore the record out making all those tapes, but guys all over the country from the DMZ to the Delta were listening to the Firesign Theatre on my cassettes. And every time a new album came out, I'd just repeat the process.
So I imagine we saved a lot of lives.
or destroyed more brains than the Viet Cong. Yeah. But, if you want to talk about the Army experience,
Were drugs prevalent as they say they were? How else would Firesign take off in the field?
I made a study of that. I had dropped acid 2 years before I ever smoked a joint. I've never been a smoker. And, if you've had an H-bomb, what do you need a firecracker for? But when I got to Nam, I realized you needed something to break that 24/7 tension.
Oh, yeah.
There was no front line. Eventually they dropped 3 rockets on my block in the middle of Saigon and burned 400 houses to the ground on Ho Chi Minh's birthday. And so there was a tension all the time. And all the lifers were drinkers. And if you're drunk, you're drunk. Mm-hmm. But if you're stoned and somebody starts shooting at you, you can straighten out pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I had to learn how to smoke.
Oh, really?
And the 10% of the guys in my unit in November of 1967 who smoked would take me to their rooms, and they would stop on the way back to the barracks, and they would ask the local Ciclo driver for a pack of Park Lanes. which I'm holding in my hand now. I'll hold it a little closer to the mic so you can see it.
Empty pack of Park
Yeah,
Lanes.
complete with a Vietnamese tax stamp on it.
Holy Moses.
They are repacked British cigarettes with commie weed in them. And they were 25 cents a pack or $2 a carton of 200. In other words, a penny a joint. And that's how we lost the war, I think.
And so you went out behind the garage and learned how to smoke, right?
Yeah, in effect. So to answer your question, by 1969, 2 years later, I'd say 70% of the troops in psyops were smokers, going up to the rank of captain. And I know this because in the second year I was there, I lived in an apartment on the main street of Saigon, a couple of blocks away from the psyops headquarters. And it became a meeting place for the war correspondents and for world tourists who wanted to come and see a groovy war, and off-duty officers who got out of uniform and would have been court-martialed in an instant if they had been caught smoking Park Lanes with Sergeant Steffens. So it was a wonderful experience in many ways. I always say it was $1 million experience you wouldn't give 10 cents to do over.
Yeah, right.
You said psyops.
Yeah, psyops. So this is my story. I for many, many years, I did a one-man show called Poetry for People Who Hate Poetry. And it was all living American writers and E. Cummings, who was just too good to ignore. Mm-hmm. And I was actor in residence at a Catholic women's college in St. Louis in April of 1967.
How old were you then?
I was 24.
Okay.
And I was doing a show called The Wooing of Women, and I played 12 different Shakespearean characters opposite 12 of the drama students at the theater department. No, we had it was an all-women's college. We didn't need any women. And I got drafted on the opening night of that show.
Oh, my God.
I never knew anybody who went into the Army. I guess all my friends beat it one way or the other, but I was a Goldwater conservative at the time. Uh-huh. I had been the New Jersey State oratory champion in my senior year in high school in 1960. The Constitution, a barrier against tyranny. What a load of crap that turned out to be. And, I worked for Bill Buckley in New York on his mayoral campaign, and I read National Review, and I was just brainwashed by 15 years of Catholic education.
You were a Nixon man that didn't vote for Catholic president? JFK?
I wasn't able to vote in 60, but I probably would have voted for Nixon. Yeah.
Against John Kennedy.
Against Kennedy.
Who was the first Catholic president.
He was. But, that didn't tip the scale for me. So 15 years of Catholic conservative education. And then I started hanging out, even in high school, with a bunch of guys who were reading Kerouac and Corso and Ferlinghetti. And I was a beatnik in my heart. Then the hippie movement came along, and I dropped my first acid in Milwaukee in 66. So I'm artist in residence at this Catholic women's college, and I get drafted. And I go to the recruiting office in St. Louis, and the recruiter says, "What do you do?" I said, "Well, I'm an actor, and I'm a broadcaster, I'm a writer." He says, "Well, if you sign up for an extra year, we'll send you to the Defense Information School, where they train the radio and TV people for the armed forces stations." I thought, I don't want to go into combat in Vietnam. And he said there were no stations in Vietnam. He didn't say yet.
Yeah.
So I enlisted for an extra year. And after basic training, they sent me, basic training, yeah. I don't even want to get into that.
No, you should have seen Roger's face when he said the word basic training. Oh, my gosh.
So then after basic training, I thought I was going off to DINFOS, Defense Information School. And instead they sent me to Fort Benjamin Harrison in Indianapolis to be a stenographer.
What?
To study shorthand. But as luck would have it, it was the same small base where Dinfos was located. So a master sergeant at Dinfos took pity on me and said, "You don't belong in stenography. I'll get you transferred." So I got transferred into psyops with a bunch of guys who'd been professional broadcasters in real life.
Wow.
The guy who created Chicken Man, Dick Orkin. He worked with Dick Orkin.
Really?
Yeah, a really bunch of great creative guys. And we had a 13-week course. 1 week we were directors. Next week we were writers. Then we were camera ops. Then we were running the telecine. And then we were on camera. And it was the best training I've ever had in any school I've been to in my life.
Now, when you say psyops,
psychological operations, which was the modern term for propaganda warfare. Well, ironically, my orders when I was going to finish the broadcast course were to go to Asmara, Eritrea, to a mountaintop station where I was going to help run the radio TV station. It was accessible one of two ways, helicopter or safari. And they were in constant warfare with the main country of Ethiopia, Eritrea.
Still are.
And I was all set to go. And the last week of class, every single one of us had our orders canceled, and we were shipped off en masse to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, to the psyops school.
All of you?
All of us, the whole class. And we were trained to carry 80 pounds of loudspeaker backpacks broadcasting pre-recorded surrender cassettes to the Viet Cong into frontline combat operations.
Wait a minute.
Our training began on the very first day with a showing of the 4-hour uncut version of Leni Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will, the Nuremberg rally film.
Nazi
the
documentary.
4-hour version.
4 hours.
And the final class, 3 weeks later, they repeated the entire 4-hour film and said, "Go to Vietnam and emulate this because it's the best propaganda work ever done." So I began to have doubts about certain things. And it was such a bizarre place. I remember being called to an assembly, and there were about 800 people in this huge auditorium at Fort Bragg, and the title was, "Why Are We in Vietnam?" And they didn't seem to be answering the question. And finally, somebody in the crowd stood up and said, "Sergeant, why are we in Vietnam?" And he looked him in the eye and he says, "That's classified, troop."
Oh, wow. Man. Oh, man.
So go off and die for us, but we're not going to tell you why.
Why? Oh, man.
Yeah. And then I ended up in Saigon, fully scared to death, fully prepared to go out into combat operations.
What, with a loudspeaker on your back?
With loudspeakers on my back.
That wouldn't make you much of a target.
No, not at all.
Where the hell is the guy?
And they looked at my IQ and my typing speed. And my dad had been the manager of the Remington Rand office in New York City on Madison Avenue, and I learned to type when I was 10 years of age, and I could type 70 words a minute. So they said, "The colonel's typist is going home next week. How would you like to live in the Walling Hotel across the street from the compound in an air-conditioned room with hot and cold running water, or you could go to the 9th Infantry Division and go out to the field?"
Oh, you thought about that for a couple of days?
It was fine for 3 months, and then the Tet Offensive broke out. And there were huge sewer pipes, like 8 feet in diameter, on the street in front of us that hadn't been laid underground yet.
Yeah.
And there were 52 refugee families living in the sewer pipes.
Oh, my goodness.
And the Vietnamese government was saying, in the middle of the Tet Offensive, "We have no refugee problem, we don't need any help." And the streets were filled, like L.A. looks now, with homeless. So I had done a great deal of work in the schools in Racine, Wisconsin. Spoken at every one of them 2 or 3 times, and all the kids knew me. And so I wrote a letter to the editor of the Racine Journal-Times describing the conditions in front of me, and I said, "If you would send me food or clothing, I guarantee you that I will personally distribute it to the refugees and make sure it doesn't end up on the black market." Mm-hmm. So they published an editorial in support of this, along with my letter. And 3 weeks later, 2 5-ton trucks pull into the compound with these huge connexes, those 9-foot-tall metal shipping containers. And my roommate was the mail clerk, and he was so pissed off. And he opened one of the doors, and these little boxes, all addressed to me, started pouring out. And I went into the colonel's office, and I said, "Colonel, sir, you've got to come outside and see something." "I'm very busy, Private." No, Colonel, please, you've got to see something." He comes out, and he sees these 2 connexes with all these packages pouring out of them. And he said, "What the hell's that, Steffens?" And I said, "Well, I think it's refugee supplies that my friends have sent me, and I've got to send them all back." "What do you mean? Come into my office." And I said, "Well, I'm so busy typing your letters, Colonel, I don't have time to personally distribute this stuff, and I promised my friends, I gave them my word that I would, because I don't want it on the black market." He promoted me to Spec 4 on the spot, gave me my own Quonset hut, told me I could go anywhere in Vietnam from the DMZ to the Delta, work on any project I thought was worthwhile, as long as I took pictures. So he could take the credit for it. And I didn't care. I wasn't a lifer. Take all the credit you want, Colonel.
Sure.
So when my year was up, I found that I could get a 5-month early out if I stayed in Vietnam up until that point, 31 months, and I could get the drop. So I was there for a total of 26 months. So the last 26 months of the 1960s, I was in Vietnam.
Wow.
And worked all over the place.
Just for people who don't know what the Tet Offensive was.
Well, it was a coordinated attack on 77 cities and regional capitals at a time when Westmoreland, the officer in charge of the war, was telling people he could see the light at the end of the tunnel. Turned out to be a train rushing toward him.
Exactly. Right.
And it was a major shock to people in the States, and that's when Cronkite went over and came back and took the anti-war stance, and that changed American public opinion too. Mm-hmm. So it was a major defeat for the Viet Cong, but it was a major propaganda victory, and in the long run, that made all the difference. Yeah.
It's a real crapshoot who is going to command you and who you have to, Well,
most of the rest of the Army hated psyops because we had I learned this officially, we had the highest average IQ of any unit in Vietnam. And it was all the misfits.
Yeah.
It was guys like me who should have been officers and didn't want that responsibility and thought the war was a crock of shit.
Right. You had already changed your politics before you got drafted?
No. After my basic training experiences and the things that I witnessed in Fort Bragg, I went over there with a lot of doubts, and then within, I'd say, 3 weeks, I just saw the corruption from top to bottom. The lobby of the Waling Hotel Barracks had slot machines in it. They had women in the PXs, beautiful blondes in mini skirts cut up to their navel practically, selling Ferraris and Maseratis, and with built-in insurance. If you die, you can leave the car to your girlfriend or your wife. Wow. And, if you wanted anything, you could find a way to get it. And, the mess sergeant would trade steaks for television sets, and it was just about money. Fisher Stereo had an office in Saigon. They sold $3 million in 1967 worth of stereo equipment to the soldiers. Everybody was making money right and left.
Catch-22.
It was Milo Binder gone completely ballistic.
And a lot of drugs.
You could buy a lot of drugs that druggies liked in any drugstore in Saigon. Huh. I was never into any of those heavy drugs. I just liked Park Lanes once I learned how to smoke them. Mm-hmm. But we had friends who sent us acid from the States. And by the end of the second year, I had done a lot of acid. And then there was the coconut monk. And that was a whole different world. Johnny Steinbeck became a good friend of mine. John Steinbeck IV, the author's son. He was there in the Army. He got busted for pot. He testified in Congress when he was out of the Army as a civilian. And he came back And he spent a lot of time with Sean Flynn, with Errol Flynn's son, who was a CBS cameraman.
Who was later murdered.
Lost in Cambodia, yeah. And so Johnny and Sean took me in January of 1969 to a place in the middle of the Mekong River called the Island of the Coconut Monk, Kon Fung. The Coconut Monk was a little tiny 4.5-foot tall guy who hadn't lain down in 20 years. He slept sitting up in the lotus position. He'd been trained, I think, as a chemical engineer by the French in France and came back to Vietnam, and they wanted him to become a colonial functionary, and instead he became a monk. And he lived in a palm tree, like a little...
So was he French?
No, he was Vietnamese.
He's Vietnamese, but trained by the French occupation forces when France was in Vietnam.
He lived in a palm tree, and they called him the Coconut Prophet for a while, and the Coconut Monk. And he amassed a lot of followers. In the early 60s, a Chinese benefactor gave him a sandbar island in the middle of the Mekong, and the North Bank was controlled by the Americans and the South Bank by the Communists, and they fired rockets and mortars over the island but never touched the island. And it was a religious Disneyland, and they were constantly adding to it. And at the end of the island, there was a circular prayer platform, and there were 9 columns. The Mekong is the river of 9 dragons. It has 9 tributaries. And each column was surrounded by a swirling yellow dragon and capped with a pink lotus blossom. And on top of one was Christ shaking hands with Buddha. On top of another was the Virgin Mary hugging Kuan Yin, the Chinese female deity. And every 3 hours, day and night, each of the families on the island would send one representative to the platform to pray for peace to Christ, Buddha, Mohammed, Lao Tse, Confucius, Sun Yat-sen, Victor Hugo, and Winston Churchill.
I love that. I love that.
And
the island, what was the name of it again?
Kon Fung, but it was known as the Island of the Coconut Monk.
Where was this?
About 80 miles south of Saigon. And anybody who came without a weapon was welcomed, no questions asked. So there were, maybe 1,000 deserters from the North Vietnamese Army and Viet Cong, about 1,000 deserters from the South Vietnamese Army. The South Vietnamese government allowed it to exist because it was a place where they could keep them from setting themselves on fire on the streets of Saigon in front of the international press. He wanted to hold a peace conference on the island, and he guaranteed that if people came to the island and met with him for a week, by the end of that week there would be peace in Vietnam. And of course everybody just laughed him off.
What happened ultimately?
He was arrested in 1975 and put on house arrest and died in 1991 under house arrest.
But now you can get a drink called the Coconut Monk at Trader Joe's in his memory.
You said that with a straight face. I was beginning to believe you.
I thought we had a new sponsor.
That's why we're just broadcasting.
Yeah, not beyond belief. Yeah.
No, not beyond belief at all. Wow.
So when I came back, I had spoken to a lot of conservative groups with my poetry show over the years.
Yeah. And
they knew me as this guy who had worked for William Buckley and voted for Goldwater and all of that.
Straight shooter.
So this is 1970. This is Kent State, Jackson State murders, massive demonstrations all over the country. And I put together a slideshow, 300 pictures that I had taken over my 26 months in Nam. And I just said, I'm only going to tell you what I personally experienced, and I want to explain to you why I am a different person from the man you knew before I got drafted.
Good for you.
And I spoke to the Davenport, Iowa Republican Women's Club, the Lutherans of Racine, Wisconsin Club, and all these straight people. I was on my way to a gig at a Catholic woman's high school in Grosse Pointe, and I heard the bulletin about the murders at Kent State. I was doing my poetry show there, and when I finished it, I said, I've got to tell you something. I heard just before I arrived here that at Kent State today, 4 students were murdered by the National Guard. The whole audience just leapt to their feet screaming. Turned out a lot of people had relatives who were students at Kent State. And I mean, they rushed for the telephones. They just abandoned the auditorium. I get goose pimples just thinking about that day.
Yes.
So I had all these gigs booked for the rest of the month, but the schools were all on strike. So instead of being the convocation speaker, I became the strike committee speaker and did dozens of talks. And you know, the only complaints I got from people were from the left. People who said, why aren't you encouraging the students to burn down the administration building?
The radical left.
The radical left, yeah. They didn't think much of what I was doing. But I got to speak to an awful lot of people who would never have entertained an anti-war speaker before that.
When you think back at Vietnam, how do you regard it?
I probably saw more of Vietnam than 99%.
How could you do that? It sounds like you had really a free,
I could write a plane ticket anywhere I wanted to go.
Because of the psyops?
Yeah, because of the colonel. And we had units in all 4
The colonel,
areas.
when all of the aid came into the refugees.
Yeah. So when I would hear about things that needed to be done, I would bring medical and dental assistance and, plane loads of clothing and medicine and food. And, I also flew leaflet drop missions. Oh, God. They had these little O2Bs, which were push-pull airplanes. They had an engine behind the cabin and an engine in front of the cabin. And they cut a hole in the floor, and we would drop leaflets through the hole in the floor. And I remember on one of these missions, I wrote about it in an essay I did called 9 Meditations on Jimi and Nam, about Jimi Hendrix and Nam. That's been widely reproduced. And, we're flying 50 feet over a Montagnard village, scaring the shit out of people, dropping leaflets on people who are illiterate. And we look off in the distance, and I've got AFVN, the Armed Forces radio station, on my earphones. And I look off, and we see this rocket, maybe 7-8 miles away, but we can see it taking off. And it describes this arc, and it lands on a barracks, and you see this 2-story barracks just go up in flames and pieces of it rocketing off in every direction. And I'm listening to Hendrix going, "Excuse me while I kiss the sky." Oh, the whole war was just
surreal and
surrealistic.
You're listening to Phil and Ted's Sexy Boomer Show.
And we're going to have some more with Roger Steffens right after this imported message.
Procter & Bergman in the audience here in Hollywood, waiting for America's newest game show to begin.
Hello, I'm Bleach Lincoln, and welcome to Eat or Be Eaten! Please welcome our contestant, Luann Starchblocker. What do you do, Luann?
I read books backwards on tape for blind Satanists.
Well, okay. For $1 million, what am I holding in my hand? A tiny ball or a 10-ton elephant?
Yeah, I'm just going to go with my instinct here. A ball.
She's right! You just won $1 million and a millionaire's mansion to stuff it in. Now, for double or nothing, Luann, who is responsible for the pitiful plight of America's homeless?
The old man with the beard who lives in the sky?
No, it's you, Luann. Well, you just lost all your money and your home, so you're going to have to go live in a box.
But not just any box, Luann. We're giving you a triple-ply corrugated cardboard box with rest-easy staples and a garbage bag to wear over your head. Isn't she lucky?
Lucky.
And remember, everybody in America is eligible, and next week you could eat or be
You're listening to Phil and Ted's Sexy Boomer Show with Phil Proctor and Ted Bonnet. To hear all the Sexy Boomer shows, go to sexyboomershow.com and press the subscribe button in your podcast player to know when a new episode drops. Back to Phil and Ted and their special guest, Mr. Reggae, Roger Steffens.
We're back, and we're speaking with
Ras Roja, also known as Roger Steffens.
I worked with you guys when you revived Radio Free Oz.
That's right.
on KPFK.
That's right. You sit in and play.
It was the second time I played reggae on the radio. The first time was when I came back from my first visit to Jamaica in 1976, and Dr. Demento put me on his show.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Goat Liver. I played Ram Goat Liver about a bus that hits a ram, and everybody in the Jamaican bus gets off and roasts the ram and eats it.
Reggae Beat. Your show on KCRW.
Oh, God, that was way beyond any success I could have ever hoped for.
What was the spark for you that turned you on to reggae?
I had met a guy in 78 in a little reggae shop on the corner of La Brea and Hollywood, which ironically is where Bob Marley's Star is now.
Oh.
And it was called Barton's Records. They were mainly down in the Crenshaw Shopping Center, but they opened up this branch in Hollywood for white people to buy reggae. And I met a fellow who said he had met a guy there the week before named Hank Holmes, who had 8,000 Jamaican records and had never left L.A. in his life.
Huh.
So
how did he do that?
I called him the minute I got home, and he found out I'd been in Jamaica already buying reggae records in 76 when I had my pocket picked in Bob Marley's record store by one of the biggest reggae stars of the time.
Oh,
and I figured with his collection and his vast knowledge and my radio background, we could do a great show. And we tried for a whole year to get on the air, and we finally got on KCRW.
What's interesting, how young reggae is.
Yeah, 68.
What is reggae? Where did it come from in 1968?
You know, I didn't know the answer to that question until 1973 when Rolling Stone, a gonzo journalist from Australia named Michael Thomas, wrote this wonderful, wonderful history of reggae, timed to the release of The Harder They Come, the Jimmy Cliff movie, and the release of Catch a Fire by the Wailers. And he said, reggae music crawls into your bloodstream like some vampire amoeba from the psychic rapids of Upper Niger consciousness. Whoa. I said, man, I've never heard of this before, but I got to find this right now. I was living in Berkeley. I ran out to a used record bookstore on Shattuck Avenue and found a $2.25 used copy of Catch a Fire, which had a sleeve that opened in the middle like a Zippo lighter.
Yeah.
And I took that home, and from the first notes of Concrete Jungle, I was stunned.
You were hooked.
And the next night, there was a little theater on the north side of Berkeley's campus, a little 40-seat revival theater, and they were showing The Harder They Come. And it was a full house. All 40 seats were filled. And there's a scene halfway through where there's a midnight smoking session with a big bong. And when that came on the screen, everyone in the theater lit a joint. And there was so much smoke, you couldn't see the screen. And on the way home, I bought the soundtrack to The Harder They Come, and my life changed forever. I could not believe that there was a body of such great work that existed a couple of 100 miles off the coast of Florida that we never heard about. My Boy Lollipop was ska. Nobody ever called it ska. The Israelites, Desmond Decker and the Aces, that was a novelty song. Nobody ever said, listen to this reggae song.
Yeah.
The style itself, is it based in roots music?
You have to remember, Jamaica was always a tourist destination, so the bands in Jamaica had to play polka and rumba and tango and German oompa and all these different forms of music, so they were incredibly skilled musicians. And in 1963, when Jamaica became independent, they wanted to have a music of their own. And they were playing a lot of soca, which calypso in Jamaica, but calypso was not Jamaican, it was Trinidadian. So they wanted to have a conscious music creation that was Jamaica's own when they became independent. And
what year was this?
This was 1963, really, when ska took hold. It was a double time, ska, 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 ska. And it became big in England because of all the Windrush generation who were brought over there to do the menial jobs. And they had huge colonies of Jamaicans in England.
Ska was fast, and reggae was slow. And you said it was because of the rumor is there was a terrible heat wave.
Oh, yeah. In 66, after 4 years of ska, it was much hotter than normal, and Jamaica is a really hot country.
Yeah.
Reminds me of Vietnam in so many ways. So they wanted to slow down the beat. and they changed it to an alternate kind of heartbeat, because all of Jamaica's music is heartbeat. It's just the tempo that changes. So ska, 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 ska became ba-bum-bum, ba-bum-bum, ba-bum-bum. And most of the soundtrack of The Harder They Come is Rocksteady era. And then the sound systems, which brought the music to the hinterlands in Jamaica with big speakers and turntables, when they would play a record, often someone would toast over it or rap over it. Rap really was born in Jamaica, and it was a Jamaican who brought it to the Bronx, Kool Herc. And then they started putting out singles where they only had one song on it. They had the A-side was the vocal and the B-side was the instrumental, so you could play the instrumental at a sound system dance and a local rapper could rap over it. And then they started to record those raps and put them on record with people like you, Roy, who passed away last year, is considered the father of rap. And in 1968, the studio musicians changed it up to chukka, 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 slowed down even further from rocksteady. And that heartbeat music was known as the roots music. This was the music that the Rastafarians played at their grownations, at their religious gatherings. And it was mainly a drum music. And then the electric bands would take different instruments to take the part of the akete drum or the bass drum and use that. You hear that especially when you hear Rastaman vibration, Rastaman chant.
That's where its roots origins are.
Yeah, the Scatolites were dreadlocked, and they used to do grownations up in the hills above Jamaica with people like Count Ossie and the Mystic Revelation of Rastafari. Ooh. And they are on a song called "O Carolina" that is considered the first real reggae song, and that was recorded in 1958.
To get to Bob Marley, Procter and Bergman were performing at Paul's Mall in Boston. And our booking agent told us that we would be opening for a group called The Wailers. And since it was Boston, I thought it was an Irish group that would be singing, well, ho, and off we go, you know. And so we show up at the club, and we go into the dressing room, and there's all these black guys. And we figured out, you know, oh my God, this is that reggae group we've heard about. And I think it was their first American tour.
It was.
And Bob was there, and they were smoking a ganja, smoking pot in a rolled up issue of the Wall Street Journal. And they were keeping their pot in a bag from the Bank of Boston. I don't know why. And so Bergman, being Bergman, said, hey, man, could we have a little bit? And Marley says, oh, sure, man. And he reaches into the bag, takes out a handful of ganja, and hands it to us. Okay? And after spending 15, 20 minutes talking to these great guys, we said, you know, Bob, you have to go on first. The crowd out there is your crowd. So why don't you go on and satisfy them? They'll never tolerate us, and then we'll do our crazy act afterwards. He said, oh, sure, man. So they went on, all wonderfully stoned, leaning up against the big speakers, and they killed. It was just wonderful. And after it was over, a little intermission, Peter and I go out to do our highfalutin, college-oriented,
very intellectual
Firesign show. And we look out at a sea of black faces, basically. And we said, this is going to be different, Peter. And there was this Roman show on PBS called I, Claudius, which was a tremendous hit. So we were doing a parody of that show. And I did this crazy speech as this character Kali-Yuga. And right when I ended it, there's dead silence. And we hear from the audience a female voice say, what did that man say? Man, you know, that totally unforgettable.
When people heard first about reggae, it was always the connotation that it was related to ganja and marijuana and getting high. But it was very
really tight.
Very tight.
Were they very rehearsed?
Oh, my God. Bob would do a single song for maybe 14 hours. I have an interview with Judy Mowat of the I3, the trio of women that sang behind him. They were top 3 women vocalists in Jamaica, really. And she said one day they did a rehearsal of, I forget what song she told me, but it was one of his most important songs, and he wanted it to be really tight and right. And they did it for 14 hours, she said, until they were in tears begging him to stop. And he says, no, not till you get this right. And he made everybody in his band learn how to play every other instrument. So they were so well rehearsed, and they knew how each song fit together so keenly that on a live show, and I have a whole cabinet filled with live tapes over there. No Woman, No Cry might be 4:24 one night, and the next night it might be 7:16, and another night it might be 13 minutes long. And he could do that on stage with just a flick of a finger or an eye movement, and the band was ready to go wherever he wanted to take him. Perfectionist.
So the ganja didn't affect it?
No. Look, all these anthems that are sung all over the world today, Redemption Song, Get Up, Stand Up, Exodus, they were all created directly under the conscious use of herb. And he got mad at people. He says, herb is not for jollification, he told me. He pointed to his forehead. He said, it's for head-ucation.
I love that.
And he didn't like people who abused it. It was sacred. It was the way to see and feel and hear God and bring God consciousness and manifest it into our consensus.
Or to write good comedy records.
God knows.
Is that a Jamaican, this notion of heavy ganja use?
Well, the Indians brought ganja to Jamaica 400 years ago. East Indians.
But it caught on.
Why wouldn't it? What's not to like?
You have said that Bob Marley was the most important musician of the 20th century.
Yeah, absolutely right. Look, I was interviewed, I think you watched it, Phil Kogan from The Amazing Race. He wanted to interview me, he said, because he had been to 130 countries and found evidence of Bob Marley in every single country he's been to. Look, Bob's music can be translated into any language and be understood. How do you translate Subterranean Homesick Blues into Urdu? His music speaks to the essential elements of a consciously lived life. It's music that comforts the sufferers. It's music that challenges the autocrats. It's music that inspires the revolutionaries. It's music that tells you how important ganja can be in a creative life. Kids love it for that reason. If kids just get into it because of ganja, they're going to be taken to places they never dreamed of if they listen right. So there is no figure in the 20th century musical sphere, John Lennon, Bob Dylan, I don't care who you bring up, that has had the effect that Bob Marley has had. To this day, he is still the top-selling reggae artist each year.
And he was tremendously politically engaged.
Despite himself. He despised politics, he despised politicians. And I'll tell you a story. The great moment in his life, one of the greatest moments, is in 1978 when he returns from exile after the assassination attempt. The concert that he did on his return was called the One Love Peace Concert, and it was to concretize a peace truce between the two warring factions in the ghetto. The JLP, the Labor Party, which was the right-wing party of Edward Seaga, whom they called Ciaga, and the Socialist Democrat Michael Manley, who was the prime minister at the time, the People's National Party. And at the end of the peace concert, he brought both of them reluctantly on stage and made them shake hands in front of 40,000 people. A moment that his art director said was like Christ on the cross between the two thieves. And I had the great pleasure in 1979 when I was traveling with him through California We had just started the reggae beat, and Island Records called us up and asked us, me and Hank, if we would mind going on the road for 2 weeks with Bob Marley. And he had 2 free nights, and he was staying at the Sunset Marquee. And on the Monday night, we showed him footage from the Smile Jamaica concert, which was done 2 nights after he was shot. He had never seen that before. And then the following night, a movie called Heartland Reggae was being edited in town by the Canadian guys who made it, of the One Love Peace concert. And I watched Bob as he watched Bob on the screen, and there was that moment when he takes the hands of these 2 guys in whose names so many thousands of people have been murdered in the gang wars in Jamaica, holds those hands aloft, and he makes this benediction to Rastafari.
Wow.
And he was asked afterwards, what was going through your mind at that moment? And he said, well, I'm no politician, but if I'm a politician, only one thing for me to do: kill them both.
Wow. Oh, that gives me chills.
How was he shot? What happened?
He was rehearsing for this Smile Jamaica concert. He was giving a free concert for the people in Jamaica after he had made his big international breakthrough. And the Jamaican, there were elections coming up, and the Siaga people felt that by doing this concert and the fact that the Prime Minister would be on stage with him, that he was endorsing the re-election of Michael Manley.
Uh-huh.
And he got kind of suckered into that. And he was warned not to do the show in advance, and he had armed guards around him day and night. But the Friday before the Sunday concert, this was December 3rd, 76, the guards, about 8 o'clock at night, just kind of disappeared.
Uh-oh.
And 2 carloads of gunmen, mostly teenagers, broke through the gates, jumped out, and started shooting everyone in sight. His wife had a bullet in her head that lodged in her skull. His manager was shot 5 times in the groin and survived. And then the gunman turned to Bob and shot him. And he had had a dream that week that his mother was shot. And the only reason she didn't die is because she froze and stood absolutely still. So Bob froze, and the bullet, he was peeling grapefruit, and the bullet came right across his heart and lodged in his left arm. And he went to the grave with that bullet in him. Oh. And the gunmen all got away. And they were people he knew. They were people he had helped support financially. He tried to help people on both sides of the political aisle, and it didn't do him any good. They came to kill him.
How did he first break onto the scene? How did it all start?
Oh, he won talent shows as a kid, and he was trained by this man, Joe Higgs, who was an early star in 1958, 59. He had one hit after another with his partner, Wilson. He even won a talent contest, and it was on the Ed Sullivan Show in the early 60s. And Joe was a mentor to a lot of young musicians, people like the Wailing Souls and others. And he, as a personal favor to a mutual friend, a man named Errol, was a tutor to Bob from the time Bob was about 14, 15 years of age. And in 1963, Bob felt he was ready to record. Joe didn't think so, but he went on his own to audition for a man named Leslie Kong, who had a lot of early hits. And he did a song called Judge Not Before You Judge Yourself, and another one called One Cup of Coffee, both of them country and western covers, although he's been credited with writing Judge Not. It was revealed recently that he didn't. And they failed, and he went back to Trenchtown and continued rehearsing with Joe Higgs, who taught him mic technique and stagecraft and composition and harmony, and was as firm a disciplinarian as Bob himself later became. And the following year, they went for an audition at Cox and Dodd Studio One, and Dodd was just a constant hit maker. And they auditioned for him, and depending on who you believe in my book, they came back the next morning, they came back 2 weeks later, they came back a couple of months later, but eventually they came back and they recorded a song called Simmer Down, and urging the people in the ghetto to cool it. That became an instant number one. It sold an astonishing 80,000 copies in a country of only 2 million people. And that was the start of a constant stream of hits for the next 2 years. And they usually made £3 a week, no matter how many tens of thousands of records they were making. And finally, in '66, Bob was disgusted, and they were being ripped off. They were making tons of money for Coxsone and not seeing any of it. So he went to America, where his mother had married a man in Delaware named Booker. He spent February to October of '66 in America. That was a big civil rights summer, and he was reading a lot of black power literature at that time, and working in the DuPont Hotel in Wilmington, sweeping floors.
Wow.
And he went back in '69 and spent the Woodstock summer of '69 at his mother's house, and worked on the floor of the Chrysler plant, driving a forklift. And that's Night Shift, the song he wrote about it, called Night Shift. Uh-huh. And he had two young friends, Ibis Pitts and Dion Wilson. Ibis had an African arts and crafts store across the street from Bob's mother's house, and they became friends. And one day, Ibis and Dion, and I've talked to both of them, were saying, "Oh, Bob, you're going to be a big star. You're going to have lots of money. You're going to have lots of kids. You're going to be world famous, and nice long life." And Bob said, No. He says, "When I'm 36, I'm going to die." That's an odd thing for a kid to be thinking about.
It certainly is.
And that's the age he died. And they were so struck by this, they went to Bob's mother and told her at the time that he had said this to them. So she's confirmed it, and the two of them have confirmed it, so I believe that's true.
And you said that when he was a kid, he could read palms.
All the time. I mean, he freaked people out like mad. The local constable would come by and he'd read his hand and tell him about his childhood. And a woman named Aunt Zen, she came to Bob's mother when he was 3.5 and said, "This kid knows things about me that nobody else in the world knows. How can he do this? You keep your eye on him, because there's something going on here." And then in my book, right at the beginning, there's a novelist from Jamaica named Jeffrey Philp. And he met Bob at the University of the West Indies in '75. And Bob started to tell him his life story. He'd never met him before. Probably never even heard of him. He was so blown away he could hardly speak. How could this guy know this stuff?
I saw Yellow Man back in the early 80s, 84.
Yeah. He was the biggest star in the aftermath of Bob, and he was the total opposite of Bob in every way you can think of. He was a misogynist. He was a homophobe. His lyrics were totally off color. It was everything Bob wasn't. And he, in the immediate aftermath of Bob Marley, the guy made something like 52 records in a year.
Wow. And
Siaga took power after Bob died, and cocaine came into Jamaica. There was a whole change, and the music changed, and reggae, the dance hall took over, and reggae died.
Really? So it was a very short-lived genre.
Yeah, I mean, there's still people making reggae, but it doesn't have the effect that dancehall has. It's the same way that the rap has taken over the American charts.
And just how big did Marley's music become worldwide?
Once Bob became a star in England and Europe in '75, the people in Jamaica recognized him.
Took that, huh?
Yeah, it took, well, him big a foreign man, so him okay.
It continued until his death.
Oh, bigger and bigger. I mean, the last major show he did in Italy was for 110,000 people in the San Siro soccer stadium. 110,000 people.
He was the total package.
He had everything. He had the looks. He was a great melodist. It was impossible to take your eyes off him. He was half white, half black. He was the synthesis.
And his message?
His message was for the black man primarily, but it was for anybody fighting for freedom. It had the conscious lyrics. It had the great music.
His life was cut so short. What happened?
Bob had cancer that was discovered in '77. He thought when he had a little piece of the toe on his right foot removed that that had stopped it. But when it was discovered, it was already third stage.
Oh, dear.
And they wanted him to amputate his foot.
This is melanoma.
It was melanoma, yeah. And it eventually went through his blood into his lungs and his brain. And he had, those last 3 years of his performing life, he knew he was ill. He knew he was going to die at 36.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Self-fulfilling prophecy. That's why his mother told me he slept 2 or 3 hours a night.
Because he just wanted to make every moment, right?
Every moment counted. When he was home in Jamaica, when he wasn't in the recording studio, people were lined up from his front door all the way out into the street begging money. His business manager, Colin Leslie, one of my dearest friends, told me that he probably supported 6,000 people a month. 6,000 people a month got money from Bob Marley. And the minute he died, his wife cut off everyone.
Wow.
He lived for other people. If I can't work for the good of other people, I don't want to be here, he said.
How did you see your life going in this direction where you become the
master of reggae,
the
caretaker
of this incredible legacy, and everything imaginable is in this space, with the exception of a thick haze of ganja smoke.
Oh, that's clinging to the walls and the fabrics.
Just
have to air it out for a moment.
Snort the carpet.
That's it. Yeah, you want to hit a rug? How did I end up doing this? God only knows. It's one thing led to another. I loved music.
You love poetry. You love words. You love rhythm.
Yeah. I'm a Gemini, so I'm a messenger of the gods. And when I find something I love, I want to turn everybody I love onto it. That's happened right from the start in '73 when I heard Catch a Fire. I wanted everybody I knew to listen to this music.
The promise of you getting your own museum space, and I know you've been working on that for a long time. And what exactly is happening with that now? How close are you to getting it?
Well, it's fascinating you ask that now because I have been trying for 30 years to get this collection to Jamaica. They have no museum of reggae there. It's ridiculous. They've ignored it for so long. It's anti-establishment music, that's why.
Yes.
And they know it.
Right.
And it really belongs in a museum in Jamaica. And I have turned down millions of dollars in the past from people who would not keep it intact. The Marley family has tried to buy it a couple of times, but they're only interested in the Bob stuff. And it has to be kept intact, and it has to be made available to the public while respecting all the artist rights. There is a man in Jamaica who is interested in it. He's coming here tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
His idea, if we can work it out, is to build a museum in Montego Bay that will have room for all the different facets of this collection. I see it as a museum of Jamaican culture. Mm-hmm. There are 1,500 T-shirts. There's 2,000 posters. There's probably 3,000 handmade buttons. Ukrainian nesting Marley dolls. There's 14,000 hours of cassettes. There's 2,000 hours of videotapes. There's statues. There's banners. There's artifacts of
posters. There's rugs.
Autographed set lists, reggae business cards.
Wow.
Hundreds of different reggae rolling papers. There's theses, there's manuscripts, paintings, and more and more.
Yeah, and more.
Yeah, and it belongs in a museum, so say a little prayer that things go well tomorrow.
Absolutely. We don't want you to have to move again.
No.
Guys, this was so much fun.
What a wonderful, lovely, heartfelt catch-up.
Thank you for the education.
My pleasure, Ted.
One love.
One love, everyone.
What a fascinating conversation.
Well, I've known Roger for 45 years, and I'm still learning things about his life and his spirit that I'm so happy to know.
Thanks for joining us. If you'd like to subscribe to our show, look for the little button that says subscribe. And you can go to our website at sexyboomershow.com, hear all of our shows with really a great group of fascinating people. And if you'd like what you hear, you might want to donate. And if you donate $20, what do they get, Phil?
They're going to get gypped because all we're going to send them is a lousy bumper sticker.
Yeah, but the adhesive is great. It doesn't fall off.
But it comes with the car.
Yeah. All right, until next time, Phil.
Yes, till the next time.
Stay sexy.
Bye.
You've been listening to Phil and Ted's Sexy Boomer Show, featuring Phil Proctor and Ted Bonnet and their special guest, Roger Steffens. Eat or Be Eaten was performed by Proctor & Bergman and Melinda Peterson. Music by Eddie Betos and the Nervous Brothers. I'm A. Ernest Guy. Stay tuned for the next episode of Phil and Ted's Sexy Boomer Show, produced by RadioPictures.com, the makers of fine podcasts for seasoned hipsters, man.